So what seems appropriate is if the data expected at each point of the node, the intercept where other nodes are communicating to it, if the data that's being relayed is a relativity matched uh, temporal stream of information of what's going on, basically like a stress strain map, then the unified set could still have communication timing built into it, and that's what could be against true for the signal set. So basically, that's how you're so sure of a false because a false is still the true. You just had to augur the field such that it's completely explained down to a vector science of, this is where the ratios in the surface area calculus intercept, and so by having a super simple intercept of ones and zeros, you can explain the exact points of, delta of what wasn't, in the big picture. Most of it isn't in the visible spectrum. So I guess what I'm saying is there's a limit to every dimension. And so every input has a limit to the total amount of dimensions that can be modeled. That's the notion of a surface area of a sphere can have the total amount of data is the internal volume by a formula of calculus kind of division of derivatives. Well, so that's what we're trying to do is keep just a derivisible system of observational logic in the system's map that's shared, and then within it is the signaling source of life, the perspectives, relative of what's being observed, and all of that, right? And so it's such a huge amount of data that it's not supposed to be something that gets honed in on. Maybe there's not even enough. I don't even know if it's such a balanced observational range. Maybe it becomes very difficult to actually hone in on anything without making it obvious that you're actually honing in on it. Maybe that the uniform map trued with relativity in the unison system displays that characteristic of in focusing and what that radiation tendril might look like in a little what vapor map of depositions of space-time inherently where it probably was because of the total mass array of distributed stress strain geometry of space-time, because that's what we're thinking about, is being able to store that in these other videos that are posted here. And so let's start with that. Feel free to look in the other videos and consider now what's the simplified computational logic, the data space. We were thinking of a first in, first out utility in arrays that nest in a points out atmosphere where the locality of a you know number, an integer, the location of it describes what that object is in the array. And so it's kind of like a key token where all of the objects, the locations in this array, are known in at the ends of the wires, right? And then if it's a peer-to-peer communication system, then it only knows of a reference perspective on an object intercept map. So it just knows of object space ID 192 in reference of, and so in that kind of a field landscape, there's no, it has no perspectives. And eventually, Uh, it can almost like laser beam energies in space time has a change of density in the atmospheric conditions on both sides of the beam in creation and dissipation in those kinds of formulations that gets tried and true to how we pace it, and that's what's a distributed tick in a survey of the nodes that all in that distributed tick help logically uh, keep the accuracy of where, okay, well, this is the timing of, this sector within this node which is described to be this shape by the system. Because if the system describes it to be that shape, then you're seeing the actual, if they're like it's the rudder, every point or node is like a rudder of space-time progressing, like measuring the eddy currents around, and of that map and of so many different points, that multitude of intercepts describes the field. And there's a logic, a progressively true to the characteristics of resolution, and the term that seems to work well is voxel, of intercept depth that accurately measure across the strains of, systems to be of that composition or that character set. And so, uh, yeah, from there, let's see what other kinds of. I was on the Upwork channel and I'm looking at some of these proposals and I'm trying to answer questions that might help everybody. Sorry about the Alexander part. That was from first initial exploration. I'm just starting with this application, and so I had to copy and paste it because of a field limit. My bad. Perfectly good intro. Stumbling into the system. uh, so the SK6812 LEDs, I'm gonna bring one over because they're very small. It's really cool to get. All right. I happen to have one of these Raspberry Pi Zeros I bring in just because they are a good reference of the surface area. That's a micro USB-C port. And then this right here I'll put on top of the processor. That's upside down. This is the LED that we'll be using. A little flea. Uh, so bad at that. How could this work? How about that? So that has, it's like a little TIE fighter. It has four actual outputs, and they control the logic for the different various emissions. And so what would be amazing is if we can make dynamic couples to where we can snap this into place. I happen to have a laser cutter, an X tool, where I'm thinking about making kind of like a bed logic of folded metal to retain this division of, I'd say, maybe a 2.5 millimeter clip size. So I was thinking if something could retain it well enough to where we could use the solder unions of high voltages and or amperages, I should say, and resistance to solder it together to staple this true, then it might be kind of a good aeroframe mechanism to have these in the right position. And one of the things that's real interesting is this new this sphere building, right? And so one of the things I'd like to consider is how this has a 120-degree surface area of visibility on the emission pattern. And so to think of how this might be a good noted effect on a triangular surface that describes a spherical ensemble, then you would have the same kind of approach to where you can think of the depth, but it could still be a really good communications device because then you have no shading occurring. And so I propose that that can still be a really good point centric way of getting started. But for whatever reason, the cubes are a little bit easier to visualize in a catalytic converter, where I have a page in Aquachroma on cdshaders.php. That's a pretty good one that describes quantum shapes or patterns that could express the most logical or the most devised signal landscape possible. And so that would express the composition of field around it. And so then to get signals to those avenues then could be, you know, the rationale on building out a more complex system from tech that's already out there. Maybe that's what the new Google algorithm really is they acknowledge all of the security updates that's no longer being enforced. So they go ahead and ramp up the amount of slave computers that they can inherently control with the amount of field interaction across the entire intercepts of sensories. I don't know. I don't know. I don't even get it. I don't even. You tell me. You tell because someone hacked my computer. I know they're there, and it doesn't seem like the CIA is stepping in to help me at all. So I don't get it. I'd like to know. It feels like with everything that I have in Aqua schedules, I'd get a little bit more access to the logics of government, but maybe that's the disruption. We'll find out.